Life has a way of taking us down roads we never expected to travel. Sometimes, those journeys reveal more about ourselves than we ever imagined. This is the story of Ku, an agric extension officer, whose routine day became an extraordinary adventure, one that changed how he saw the world, and perhaps, how you will too. Settle in and listen closely, as we embark on the unexpected journey of Ku. It was a typical afternoon for Ku. The sun hung low in the sky as he packed up his tools after another long day of working in the fields. Ku had always enjoyed his job as an agric extension officer. Helping farmers improve their crops, finding new ways to nurture the land, this was his passion. Today had been no different, and now it was time to head home. The forest path that led back to his town was one Ku had walked many times before. The trees lined the narrow road, and the sound of rustling leaves was like music to his ears. Normally, this was the most peaceful part of his day, but on this particular evening, something felt off. Ku glanced around as he walked. The path ahead seemed unfamiliar, as if the forest had shifted overnight. The trees, tall and imposing, appeared darker, their branches twisting together in strange patterns. He could still see the faint outline of the trail beneath his feet, but it seemed to wind in directions he didn't remember. Ku stopped and took a deep breath, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping over him. "I've been down this path 100 times. I'm just tired," he muttered to himself. Yet, with every step he took, the forest seemed to close in around him. Then it happened. Suddenly, the trail he had been following for years disappeared. One moment it was there, the next it was gone, swallowed by the forest as though it had never existed. Ku's heart raced. This can't be real," he thought, panic beginning to rise. He spun around, trying to retrace his steps, but the trees behind him had shifted too. The way back was no longer visible. Just as fear was about to take over, Ku heard a voice. "You seem lost," the voice said, calm but with an edge of mystery. Ku turned quickly, startled by the sudden appearance of an elderly man. The man stood a few steps away, his weathered face partially hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat. He carried a bow across his back and held a spear in his hand, his posture steady and assured. "I am," Ku replied, trying to mask his surprise. "I've walked this path countless times, but now I can find my way." The old man smiled faintly. "Not all paths lead where you think they will," he said. "But you are not lost. You've simply wandered into a different kind of journey." Ku stared at him, unsure what to make of his words. "Who are you?" he asked. "My name is Papa," the stranger said, his voice carrying a sense of timeless wisdom. "I know this forest well. If you like, I can guide you out." Ku hesitated. There was something odd about Papa, something that made him seem almost unreal. But what choice did he have? He couldn't stay in the forest, lost and confused, with nightfall approaching. "I'd appreciate that," Ku said, deciding to trust him. Papa nodded and gestured for Ku to follow. Together, they walked deeper into the forest, though every step made Ku feel like they were moving farther from where he needed to go. The trees grew taller, their branches denser, as if the forest itself was closing in on them. Ku glanced back several times, only to find that the path they had just walked seemed to vanish behind them. No matter how much he tried to trace his steps, there was nothing but dense forest. His chest tightened with each look, but Papa seemed unconcerned, moving with calm certainty. "How do you know the way?" Ku asked after a while, his curiosity getting the better of him. Papa didn't look back. "The forest has its own way of guiding those who listen," he said. "It's not about the path you can see, but the one you feel." Ku pondered the old man's words, unsure of what they meant. The forest seemed to grow more mysterious with every passing minute. Time, too, felt strange, Had they been walking for hours? Or only minutes? Ku couldn't tell. Just when Ku thought they might be wandering forever, the trees began to part, and before him stood a village. But this was no ordinary village. The houses were small and perfectly built, glowing softly in the evening light. The air was thick with tranquility, as though time moved slower here. Everything felt different, surreal, yet welcoming. "Where are we?" Ku asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Welcome to Njano," Papa replied. "This is my village. It's not a place many find on their own." Ku marveled at the beauty of the village, but there was something strange about it, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. The people moved quietly, their faces serene, yet there was an aura of secrecy in the air. "Come," Papa said. "You must be tired. Let me show you to my home." Ku followed Papa through the village, feeling a mix of awe and unease. They soon arrived at Papa's house, where Ku was greeted by Papa's wife, Abina, and their young son, Tono. Abina was warm and welcoming, and Tono, full of energy, couldn't stop staring at Ku with wide, curious eyes. Abina served Ku a hearty meal of freshly cooked food, and as they sat down to eat, Papa began to speak. "Njano is a peaceful place," he said, "but we live by certain rules here. One of the most important rules is that visitors are not allowed to attend the weekly gatherings at the Grand Palace." Ku raised an eyebrow. "The palace? What happens there?" Papa exchanged a look with Abina before turning back to Ku. "That is not something you need to concern yourself with. It is a sacred place, and the meetings are for the villagers only." Though Papa's words were kind, they left Ku with annoying curiosity. What could possibly be so important that he wasn't allowed to see it? He tried to push the thoughts aside, but they lingered in the back of his mind. Days passed, and Ku grew comfortable in Njano. The villagers were kind, and Papa's family treated him like one of their own. Yet, despite the peaceful surroundings, the mystery of the Grand Palace continued to weigh on Ku's mind. Every week, the villagers would gather there for a secret meeting, but Ku was always left behind. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ku sat outside Papa's house, watching as the villagers made their way to the palace once again. His curiosity was now unbearable. "Why am I being kept out?" Ku thought. What could they possibly be hiding? That night, Ku made up his mind. He would sneak into the palace and find out for himself what was going on. When darkness had fully settled over the village, Ku made his way toward the Grand Palace, keeping to the shadows. The palace was even more magnificent up close, with towering walls adorned with intricate carvings that seemed to tell stories of times long past. Ku's heart pounded as he approached the entrance. He hesitated for a moment, but his curiosity pushed him forward. He slipped inside, careful not to make a sound. Inside, the palace was vast and grand, with pillars that seemed to reach the heavens. In the center of the room was a circle of elders, their faces calm and wise, and surrounding them were villagers. But what caught Ku's eye most were the figures standing at the front of the gathering. They were familiar, too familiar. Ku gasped, his heart skipping a beat. "These are my ancestors," Ku whispered to himself, barely believing his own eyes. The elders turned to face him, their expressions unreadable. "You have found your way here, Ku," one of the elders said, his voice deep and commanding. "You have come seeking answers, and now you shall receive them." Ku stepped forward, his legs trembling. "What is this place? Why are my ancestors here?" The elder smiled. "Njano is not like other villages. It is a place where the spirits of those who have passed on gather to guide the living. Your ancestors have been watching over you, guiding you toward the wisdom you have yet to realize." Ku's mind swirled with confusion and awe. "So, all of this time, I've been among spirits?" The elder nodded. Yes, Ku. The villages, Papa, even the forest itself, they are all part of a world beyond the one you know. You were brought here to remember your roots, to connect with your ancestors and the wisdom they hold. This journey was meant to remind you that life is more than just work and routine. Ku stood there, speechless, as the weight of the revelation sank in. His ancestors, the village, everything, it had all been part of something much bigger than he had ever imagined. Before Ku could even take in the magnitude of what he had just learned, the palace walls began to dissolve, as though the very air around him was shifting. The elders, the villagers, and even the familiar faces of his ancestors started to blur, their forms slowly fading into the mist. No, wait! Ku shouted, trying to reach out, but his hands grasped at nothing. The grand palace, the village of Njano, all of it was disappearing before his eyes. Suddenly, Ku found himself sitting upright on a public transport bus. The familiar sounds of the city rushed back into his ears, the hum of the engine, the chatter of passengers, the faint music playing from a radio somewhere in the background. His heart was still racing, his breath uneven. He blinked, trying to steady himself. What just happened? He whispered to himself, looking around. The buildings outside the window were all too familiar. He was on his usual route home from work, just as he had been earlier that day. But the memory of the forest, the village, and the palace still clung to him like a vivid dream, one that felt far too real to simply dismiss. Ku's mind raced as the bus continued along its path. Had it all really been a dream? The sight of Papa, the villagers, his ancestors, it had felt so real, as though he had truly been there, walking among the spirits of his past. But now, here he was, back in the hustle and bustle of everyday life, as if nothing had ever happened. When Ku finally arrived home, he was greeted by the familiar sight of his family. His wife, Amma, was busy preparing dinner in the kitchen, while their two children, Nana and Kwame, played outside in the yard. It was a scene of normalcy, of routine, yet Ku felt like he had just returned from a journey that had shifted something deep within him. Amma looked up from her cooking as Ku entered the house, a warm smile on her face. "You're home a little later than usual today," she said. "Everything okay?" Ku hesitated, unsure of how to explain what he had experienced. How could he put into words the strange, mystical journey he had just been on? Would they even believe him if he tried? I think I just had the strangest experience," Ku finally said, sitting down at the kitchen table. "Something happened to me on my way home. It's hard to explain, but I feel like I've just returned from a place that exists beyond this world." Amma raised an eyebrow, curious but concerned. "What do you mean? Did something happen in the forest?" Ku nodded slowly. "I got lost in the forest, or at least I thought I did. But then, I met a man. His name was Papa, and he guided me to a village that wasn't like any place I've ever seen. The people there, they were different. And when I finally found out the truth, I realized they weren't even alive. They were spirits, my ancestors." Amma's hands paused over the dinner pot as she listened to Ku's words. She turned to face him, her eyes wide with surprise. "Spirits? Ku, are you sure you weren't just dreaming?" "I don't know," Ku admitted, shaking his head. "It felt like a dream, but at the same time, it felt so real. The village, the palace, everything. I don't know how to explain it. They told me I had been guided there for a reason, to connect with my ancestors and remember where I come from." Amma sat down across from Ku, her expression softening as she realized how deeply this experience had affected him. "Maybe it doesn't matter whether it was real or a dream," she said gently. "What's important is what you learned from it. Your ancestors were trying to tell you something. Maybe this is their way of reminding you that we're never really alone, that they're always with us, guiding us." Ku looked into his wife's eyes, feeling a sense of calm wash over him. She was right. Whether it had been a dream or something more, the message he had received was clear. His ancestors were with him, watching over him, guiding him in ways he hadn't even realized. "I think you're right," Ku said softly, a small smile creeping onto his face. "There's more to life than what we see. Our ancestors are always with us, whether we are aware of it or not. And maybe that's the most important lesson of all." And so, Ku's journey came to an end, not with answers, but with understanding. The path he had walked through the forest, the village of Njano, the faces of his ancestors, it all led him to a simple yet profound truth, that life is much deeper than we can ever fully comprehend. We are connected to the past, to those who came before us, in ways we may never fully see. I've learned that life isn't just about the things we can touch, the places we can go, or the work we do. It's about the invisible threads that connect us to the generations before us, the wisdom, the love, the lessons they left behind. Even when we think we're walking alone, we're never truly alone. The ancestors are always with us, guiding us towards something greater. Ku reflected. I hope you enjoyed the story. Share the moral lesson you've learned in the comments below, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to stay tuned for more amazing tales. Thank you for watching.